My son wrote, "Don't wait up. Every holiday is for Sloane's parents now. They are vital to my career networking. Don't ask us again." I read the message. I didn't gasp. I didn't drop the phone. I just stared at the screen, feeling a sensation I hadn't felt in decades. It wasn't pain. It was emptiness. Absolute, vacuum-sealed emptiness. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. I was standing in the chef's kitchen of my estate, wearing a linen apron. The air smelled of sage, brown butter, and roasted chestnuts, Ethan's favorite stuffing. On the counter sat a 20-pound heritage turkey. I had been brining it for 72 hours. I had sourced it from a local organic farm, specifically because Ethan once said supermarket turkeys were too dry. I had spent 3 days preparing a feast for a son who just told me I was obsolete. They think I am just an old woman living on a dusty farm in the valley. Sloane, my daughter-in-law, calls my home rustic. She turns up her nose at the dirt on my boots. She doesn't know that this dusty farm is a vineyard that produced a Pinot Noir rated 98 points by Wine Spectator last year. She doesn't know that the old paintings in my study aren't thrift store finds, but 17th century originals I am restoring for the National Museum. To them, I am just the bank account that bought them their $2 million penthouse in the city. A penthouse they have never invited me to visit. I looked at the turkey. It represented my love, my effort, my pathetic hope. Vital to his career, I whispered. I turned off the oven. I picked up the heavy roasting pan. I walked to the industrial trash compactor by the pantry. I didn't hesitate. I dumped the entire bird stuffing, herbs, and all into the bin. The heavy thud of the meat hitting the bottom echoed in the silence. I took off my apron and folded it neatly. Then, I walked to my wine cellar. I bypassed the table wine I usually served when they visited. I reached for the top shelf and pulled down a dusty bottle. A 1,982 Bordeaux, worth more than Sloane's engagement ring. I uncorked it, poured a glass, and sat in my high-backed velvet chair facing the empty fireplace. "Don't ask again," he had said. "Don't worry, Ethan," I said to the empty room, swirling the dark red liquid. Silence is not inaction. Silence is observation. And in my line of work, before I restore a masterpiece, I study it under UV light to find the cracks and forgeries hidden beneath the varnish. 2 days after throwing the turkey in the trash, I drove to the city, not to knock on the door of the penthouse I had bought for Ethan, but to park my vintage Aston Martin across the street from Le Jardin, the French bistro where Sloane had just tagged herself online. I watched them through the tinted glass. Mr. and Mrs. Harrington looked the part of a wealthy dynasty in pinstripes and diamonds, laughing and sipping champagne. But then there was Ethan. My son wasn't sitting with them. He was standing by the table like a glorified valet, holding Mrs. Harrington's heavy shopping bags and Mr. Harrington's overcoat. And when he finally sat down, he took a folding chair at the edge of the table because he didn't warrant a booth seat. I saw Mrs. Harrington snap her fingers at him to pour her water, and he obeyed with a pathetic eagerness that hardened my heart instantly. This wasn't a marriage. It was a hostage situation. I immediately called Leo, Ethan's former best friend turned forensic accountant, and met him an hour later at a quiet library archive where he revealed the ugly truth beneath the Harringtons' shiny veneer. Leo opened his laptop and showed me that the old money Harringtons were actually drowning in debt. With their estate mortgaged 3 times over and a string of failed businesses being sued by vendors, worse, Leo revealed that Ethan had taken out 4 personal loans and co-signed a $250,000 business loan for his father-in-law, effectively using his clean credit record to keep their sinking ship afloat while they treated him like a servant. Sloane hadn't married him for love. She had harvested him for his credit score because they assumed I was just a simple farmer who wouldn't notice. I stood up, looking down at the city streets where my son was being bled dry, and realized it was time to stop being a mother and start being a restorative artist, stripping away the fake varnish. I told Leo to draft a complex legal document for a Stone family trust worth millions. A trap designed to be so bright and tempting that it would blind their greed and force them to reveal their true colors. I drove back to the vineyard that night not with emptiness, but with a cold, terrifying purpose, ready to give them a legacy they would never forget. Revenge, like restoring a 17th century oil painting, requires patience. You cannot simply scrub away the dirt. You must apply the right solvent, wait for it to react, and then gently lift the grime to reveal the truth underneath. I had identified the grime, the Harringtons' greed. The next morning, I drove to the oldest district in the city, stopping before a brownstone building with a brass plaque that hadn't been polished since the Nixon administration. Atticus Reed, Esquire. Atticus was 80 years old, wore tweed suits that smelled of pipe tobacco, and was arguably the most brilliant trust and estate lawyer in the state. He managed fortunes for families whose names appeared on university buildings. He was also the only person, besides Leo, who knew exactly what I was worth. Magdalena, Atticus croaked, gesturing for me to sit in a leather chair that engulfed me. You look like a woman who is about to commit a murder. But legally. Not murder, Atticus, I replied, placing Leo's financial dossier on his desk. Just a little. Corporate restructuring of my family dynamic. I explained the situation. I told him about the career networking, the turkey in the trash, and the staggering debts the Harringtons were hiding. Atticus read through the file Leo had compiled. He whistled low and long. They are underwater, he noted, tapping the paper. They have a balloon payment of $400,000 due on January 15th. If they miss it, they lose their primary residence. They are desperate, Mags. Exactly, I said, and desperate people make mistakes. So, Atticus leaned back, steepling his fingers. What do you need? I need a trust, I said. The Stone Family Legacy Trust. I need it to look immense. I need it to look accessible. And I need it to have very specific strings attached. Atticus grinned, revealing teeth stained by years of espresso, my favorite kind of strings. Let's draft it. We spent the next 3 hours crafting a masterpiece of fiction wrapped in legal truth. The trust was real. I did have the assets to back it up if I chose to, but the valuation was designed to dazzle. We valued the vineyard not just as agricultural land, but as a historic heritage site with development potential. We added the art collection currently sitting in my climate-controlled vault. Total estimated value, $15 million. But the genius was in Clause 7B. The competency and unity stipulation. I dictated the terms while Atticus typed on his ancient typewriter. The beneficiary, Ethan, shall be granted access to the principal fund upon proof of familial stability and moral competency. Specifically, the beneficiary must demonstrate a commitment to family unity by hosting a full family gathering at the Stone estate during the Christmas holiday of the current year. Failure to adhere to family traditions or estrangement from the grantor Magdalena Stone will result in the immediate dissolution of the trust in favor of charitable causes. It's a honeypot, Atticus chuckled as he stamped the document with a heavy wax seal. You're dangling $15 million in front of people who need $400,000 to survive next month. I want it delivered by courier, I said, standing up. Tonight, to the penthouse. Address it to Ethan, but make sure the envelope is marked urgent. Financial disclosure. Sloane opens all his mail. She won't be able to resist. I left Atticus's office feeling lighter. I called Leo on the drive home. The package is on its way, I told him. Do you have eyes on the penthouse? I've got access to their smart home hub and Ethan's laptop webcam, Leo replied. It's a little gray area legally, but for you, Mags? I'm watching. I returned to my dusty farm. I didn't turn on the lights. I sat in the dark kitchen, my phone placed face up on the table. At 7:45 p.m., Leo texted me, "Courier delivered." At 7:50 p.m., "Sloan is opening it. Ethan is in the shower." At 7:55 p.m., "She's reading it. Mags. She just dropped her wine glass. She's screaming for Ethan." I could imagine the scene. Sloan, with her fake pearls and mounting credit card debt, looking at a document that promised to solve all her problems and elevate her to the true elite status she craved. $15 million. She wouldn't see a mother. She would see a winning lottery ticket. And Ethan? He would see salvation. He would see a way to finally be worthy in the eyes of his in-laws. I waited. I poured myself a glass of water. I counted the seconds. Calculated greed moves fast. At 8:05 p.m., my phone lit up. Ethan calling. I let it ring 3 times, then 4. I wanted them to sweat. I wanted them to wonder if they had pushed me too far, if the "don't ask us again" text was truly the final nail. On the 5th ring, I picked up. "Hello?" I said, my voice sounding weary and old, perfectly crafted for the role I was playing. "Mom?" It wasn't Ethan. It was Sloan. Her voice was unrecognizable. Gone was the condescension. Gone was the cold, passive-aggressive tone she used when criticizing my cooking. Instead, her voice dripped with a sugary, frantic warmth that made my skin crawl. "Mom!" "Oh, thank God you picked up. Ethan is here. We were just sitting here crying." "Crying?" I asked innocently. "Whatever for? Sloan?" "Because we realized how terrible we've been." Sloan sobbed a theatrical, Oscar-worthy performance. "We got the letter from Mr. Reed." "Mom, why didn't you tell us you were settling your affairs? It breaks my heart to think of you dealing with all that paperwork alone." I closed my eyes and smiled in the dark. The fish had not just bitten the hook, she had swallowed it whole. "Well, Sloan," I said slowly, "I didn't think you'd be interested. After all, Ethan said the holidays were for your parents now." "Oh, that!" Sloan let out a nervous, high-pitched laugh. "That was just Ethan being stressed. You know how he gets." "Mom, listen. Forget the text. We're family, and family belongs together at Christmas. Family belongs together," Sloan repeated, her voice trembling with synthetic emotion. "In fact, Mom, I was just telling my parents about your situation, about the trust. They feel terrible that you're handling such a massive estate all by yourself." She paused, and I could hear the muffled sound of Mrs. Harrington whispering instructions in the background. "Actually," Sloan continued, "Mom and Dad would love to come too. They've always wanted to see the vineyard. They think it's charming, rustic chic." I held the phone away from my ear for a second to roll my eyes. 2 days ago, it was a dusty farm. Now, after seeing a $15 million valuation, it was rustic chic. "Oh, Sloan," I said, injecting a quiver into my voice. "I don't know. The house is old. The heating is temperamental. I wouldn't want to inconvenience people of their stature." "Inconvenience?" Sloan laughed, a sound like glass breaking. "Don't be silly. We want to help. We want to be there for you. We'll bring everything, the wine, the gifts. We'll make this the best Christmas ever." "Well," I sighed, sounding defeated, "if you insist, I suppose it would be nice to have a full house again. Before Well, before I decide on the final beneficiary, the line went silent for a heartbeat. I had dropped the bait again. "We'll be there on Christmas Eve," Sloane promised quickly. "Prepare the guest rooms. Love you, Mom." Click. I set the phone down on the kitchen counter. The silence returned to the house, but it didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt like the calm before a storm. My laptop beeped. It was Leo. He had sent me an audio file titled Penthouse, Living Room, 8:15 p.m. MP3. "You're going to want a drink for this one, Mags," Leo's text read. I poured another glass of the 1982 Bordeaux and pressed play. The audio was crisp. The microphone on Ethan's laptop was excellent. 15 million, Mr. Harrington's voice boomed. "Are you sure the document is real?" "It's from Atticus Reed," Ethan replied. His voice sounded small, nervous. "He's the best in the state. If he drafted it, the assets exist." I knew she was hiding something. "Mrs. Harrington screeched. "Did you see the valuation on the art? That old painting in the hallway? She has a Rubens, and she let it sit in a hallway?" "She's senile," Sloane said dismissively. "She doesn't know what she has. She's just sitting on a gold mine, complaining about turkeys." I took a sip of wine. "Senile. Interesting." The recording continued. "So what's the plan?" Ethan asked. "We go there, we eat dinner, and then what?" "Don't be stupid, Ethan," Mr. Harrington snapped. "Clause 7B says you need to prove familial stability. That means we need to charm the old bat. We flatter her. We tell her the vineyard is magnificent. And then," he lowered his voice, but the mic picked it up clearly, "then we get her to sign over power of attorney. We tell her it's to help manage the trust. Once we have control, we liquidate the art to pay off the loan sharks. We subdivide the land and sell it to developers. We can turn that dusty farm into a luxury golf course by next summer." "What about Mom?" Ethan asked. To his credit, he sounded hesitant. "Where does she live if we sell the house?" "Assisted living," Sloane said instantly. "There's a nice place upstate. It's clean. She'll be happier there. She won't have to worry about the stairs. Besides," Mrs. Harrington added with a cruel laugh, "with $15 million, we can afford the premium package for her. She'll have plenty of Jell-O." I stopped the recording. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. The last shred of guilt I had felt about setting this trap evaporated. They weren't coming to visit. They were coming to harvest me. They were planning to put me in a home and pave over my life's work to build a golf course. "Assisted living," I whispered to the empty kitchen. I looked at the walls of my home, the hand-carved molding I had restored myself, the fireplace where I had rocked Ethan to sleep as a baby. I think not. I picked up my phone and called Atticus. "They're coming," I said. "Excellent," the old lawyer replied. "Is the final document ready?" "It is. Bring it on Christmas Day. Make sure you arrive right after dinner. That's when they plan to make their move." "I'll be there with bells on," Atticus chuckled. "And Magdalena?" "Yes? Do try to act surprised when they stab you in the back. It makes the reveal so much more satisfying." I hung up. I had 3 days to prepare. They wanted a rustic chic Christmas? I would give them one. I went to the basement and retrieved the old decorations. Not the nice ones, the tacky ones from the 90 seconds that I knew Mrs. Harrington would hate. I went to the wine cellar and moved the good bottles, the ones worth thousands, behind a false wall. In the main racks, I placed bottles of cheap supermarket vinegar wine that I had relabeled with fancy tags. I turned down the thermostat to 62 degrees. I wanted them uncomfortable. I wanted them cold. I wanted them to look at my home and see nothing but a resource to be exploited. And when the trap snapped shut, I wanted to make sure their necks were fully inside. Christmas Eve arrived with a biting wind that rattled the window panes of the estate. perfect weather for a cold reception. At 4 p.m. sharp, the invasion began. It wasn't a family visit. It was a tactical deployment. 3 black Range Rovers pulled up the gravel driveway, crunching the silence beneath their tires. I stood by the window, adjusting my shawl. I had chosen a faded, slightly moth-eaten wool cardigan for the occasion. I stopped dyeing my hair 2 weeks ago, letting the gray roots show. I wanted to look like the senile old bat they described in the recording. Ethan got out of the first car. He looked thinner, his face drawn and pale. He didn't look at the house with nostalgia. He looked at it with calculation. Then, the Harringtons emerged. Mrs. Harrington stepped into the mud in stiletto heels, immediately grimacing. Mr. Importer. Harrington surveyed my vineyards not with appreciation for the terroir, but like a developer measuring square footage for a parking lot. And Sloane. She wore a white fur coat that probably cost more than my tractor. She held a bottle of champagne like a weapon. I opened the heavy oak front door. "Mom," Sloane cried out, rushing up the steps to embrace me. The scent of her expensive perfume was suffocating. "Oh, look at you. You look so fragile." "Doesn't she look fragile, Ethan?" Ethan trudged up the steps behind her, carrying 4 Louis Vuitton suitcases. "Hi, Mom," he mumbled, not meeting my eyes. "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas, darling," I said, my voice trembling slightly. I reached out a hand to touch his cheek, but he flinched away, pretending to adjust his grip on the bags. "Careful with those!" Mrs. Harrington barked from the driveway. "My evening gowns are in there." They swept into the hallway, bringing the cold air and their chaotic energy with them. "Charming," Mrs. Harrington sniffed, looking at the peeling paint I had intentionally left on the wainscoting. "Very. Period authentic. But my God, Magdalena, it's freezing in here." "Can't you afford heating?" "Oh, the boiler is old," I apologized, clutching my shawl tighter. "Like me, it takes a while to warm up." "Well, we'll fix that," Mr. Harrington boomed, clapping his hands. "Once the trust is settled, we'll modernize this entire place. Central HVAC. Smart thermostats. You won't recognize it." "I'm sure I won't," I murmured. We moved to the drawing room. I had set out the wine, the cheap, vinegar-like swill I had decanted into crystal bottles labeled Chateau Margaux 1990. "Please," I gestured to the glasses. "A toast to family." Mr. Harrington poured himself a generous glass. He swirled it, sniffed it with exaggerated expertise, and took a sip. I watched closely. Any true connoisseur would have spit it out. Ideally, on the rug. "Exquisite." "Mr." Harrington declared, smacking his lips. "You can really taste the oak. Sloane, try this. This is a $2,000 bottle." Sloane took a sip. Divine. So smooth." I suppressed a smile. They were frauds. Absolute, irredeemable frauds. They tasted money, not wine. "I'm glad you like it," I said sweetly. "I saved it just for you." The evening wore on, and their confidence grew with every glass of terrible wine. They stopped pretending to be guests and started acting like owners. I sat in my corner chair, knitting a prop I had picked up for the occasion while they discussed renovations right in front of me. "That wall should go," Sloane said, pointing to the load-bearing wall separating the kitchen and dining room. "For entertaining. And the art," Mrs. Harrington added, staring at a landscape painting above the mantel. "It's so gloomy. We should sell these dusty old things and buy some modern abstract pieces. Something that pops." "Sell them?" I asked weakly. "But that's a Turner. My husband bought it on our honeymoon." "Mom, please," Ethan spoke up for the first time, exasperated. "It's dark. It's depressing. We're trying to help you. The trust is about maximizing value, right? You want us to be happy, don't you? There it was, the weaponized guilt. I do want you to be happy, Ethan, I said. I want you to get exactly what you deserve. Exactly. Mr. Harrington nodded, his face flushed. Now, Magdalena, about tomorrow. Atticus Reed is coming, correct? Yes. After dinner. Good. We've taken the liberty of drafting a few amendments to the management structure. Just to take the burden off your shoulders. We'll have you sign over the power of attorney first, just to streamline things. He smiled, a shark baring its teeth. You won't even have to read the boring parts. We'll handle everything. You can just relax. Relax, I repeated. In the facility, upstate? The room went deadly silent. Sloane froze, her glass halfway to her mouth. What? She asked sharply. Oh, nothing, I blinked, feigning confusion. I thought I heard someone mention a facility earlier. My hearing isn't what it used to be. I must be hearing things. You definitely are. Mrs. Harrington laughed nervously. Nobody is sending you anywhere, Magdalena. We're going to take care of you right here. Of course. I smiled. Right here. I stood up slowly, leaning heavily on my cane. I'm going to bed now. I need to rest for the big day tomorrow. The turkey won't cook itself. Good night, Mom, Ethan said, already looking at his phone. Good night, Ethan, I said. Enjoy the wine. Drink it all. There's plenty more in the cellar. I walked up the stairs, listening to their laughter erupt as soon as I was out of sight. They were celebrating. They thought the old woman was down for the count. They didn't know that upstairs in my office, Leo was currently setting up the projector for tomorrow's dinner. They didn't know that the Turner painting, Mrs. Harrington wanted to sell was a fake I had hung there to test them. The real one was safe in the vault. They were measuring drapes for a house that was about to burn down around them. Christmas dinner was served at 7 p.m. in a dining room dimly lit by flickering candles that cast long, dancing shadows against the walls, creating a somber atmosphere that the Harringtons mistook for intimacy. I had roasted another turkey, this one perfect, golden brown, and smelling of rosemary and thyme, and I watched in silence as they devoured the food just as voraciously as they planned to devour my assets. Atticus Reed arrived just as dessert was being served, shaking the snow off his tweed coat and carrying a thick leather portfolio that looked like a weapon in the candlelight. Mr. Harrington immediately cheered, raising his glass to the man of the hour and inviting him to join the discussion about the bright future of the Stone estate. But Atticus simply sat down next to me, pushed aside the cranberry sauce, and placed the portfolio on the table with a heavy thud, dryly noting that the future was indeed what we were there to discuss. Sloane, ever the impatient opportunist, clapped her hands and urged us to sign the papers immediately so I could rest, treating me like an expiring obligation rather than a host. That was the moment I dropped the mask. I stood up and tapped my crystal glass with a silver spoon. The sharp ding, 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 cutting through the room like a blade. And when I spoke, my voice had shed the tremor I had feigned for 24 hours, replaced by the commanding tone of a woman who had run a business for 40 years. I announced that before any signing took place, I had prepared a family retrospective to honor the union, and with a subtle nod to the dark alcove in the corner, I signaled Leo to execute the final phase of the trap. The Harringtons spun around in confusion as Leo, whom they hadn't noticed sitting in the shadows, hit a key on his laptop, causing a large projection screen to descend from the ceiling and cover the gloomy Turner painting they so despised. The room went deadly silent as the screen illuminated their darkest secrets. A detailed spreadsheet titled "The Harrington Financial Portfolio" listed their 3 defaulted mortgages, $1.5 million in outstanding business loans, and the $450,000 personal liability they had saddled onto my son, Mr. Harrington stood up, his face turning purple as he screamed that this was illegal private data, but I simply commanded him to sit down with such authority that he collapsed back into his chair without another word. I walked slowly around the table, looking them in the eye as I explained that I needed to understand who I was going into business with, exposing them not as the elite dynasty they claimed to be, but as destitute frauds desperate for a bailout. Before Mrs. Harrington could finish her shrill defense about liquidity issues, I signaled Leo to play the audio recording, filling the dining room with their own cruel voices from the night before. Sloane calling me a senile bat, Mrs. Harrington laughing about putting me in a facility with plenty of jello, and Mr. Harrington plotting to turn my life's work into a golf course. The silence that followed was heavier than a grave. Sloane turned pale, her mouth opening and closing uselessly, while Ethan buried his face in his hands, unable to look at me. Mr. Harrington looked at me with pure hatred, hissing that I had lured them there. And I admitted it freely, telling him I needed to see if there was any redemption left in my son, any spine at all. I turned to Ethan, asking him why he didn't defend me when they planned to lock me away, and when he stammered an apology, I reminded him coldly that his only contribution to my defense was negotiating the quality of my prison cell. Atticus Reed then delivered the final blow, opening his leather portfolio to reveal that while the Stone Family Legacy Trust had been drafted, the failure to meet the moral competency clause of Section 7B meant the assets had been reallocated. Sloane whispered in horror, asking where the money went. And Atticus calmly produced 2 new documents: a deed of gift transferring my entire art collection to the National Museum effective immediately, and a land conservancy trust that permanently designated the vineyard as protected agricultural land, ensuring it could never be subdivided, developed, or turned into a golf course. Mr. Harrington screamed, overturning his chair in a blind rage as he realized I had given away $15 million just to spite them. But I took a sip of my wine, the real one. 1,982 Bordeaux. I had hidden under the table, and corrected him, stating that I hadn't given it away. I had protected it from parasites. I looked at their stunned, greedy faces and told them that this was their true legacy. They would be remembered as the family who lost everything because they couldn't pretend to be decent human beings for a single weekend. And then, pointing a shaking finger at the door, I ordered them to get out of my house. The sound of a door slamming has never sounded so sweet. But it wasn't the front door of my house. It was the car door of the Range Rover outside. "You are useless!" Sloane's voice shrieked from the driveway, loud enough to penetrate the thick stone walls of the estate. "You promised me he would fix it. You promised me money, Ethan. What am I supposed to do with a bankrupt architect?" I stood at the window, watching the scene unfold under the porch lights. Mr. and Mrs. Harrington were already in the car, stone-faced. They cut their losses quickly. Sloane was standing by the open passenger door, looking at Ethan. Ethan stood in the snow, shivering in his thin designer suit. He reached out for her. "Sloane, please. We can figure this out. We're married. We're insolvent, Ethan," she spat. "Don't follow us unless you have a check." She got in. The car sped away, tail lights fading into the dark, leaving my son standing alone in the freezing cold. He stood there for a long time. Then, slowly, he turned and walked back into the house. He walked into the dining room where Atticus, Leo, and I were finishing the real wine. Ethan looked like a ghost. He looked at the empty chairs where the elite Harringtons had sat. He looked at the projection screen, still displaying his debts. "They left me," he whispered. "Of course they did," I said, not rising from my chair. The host organism stopped providing blood. The parasites moved on. Ethan looked at me. His eyes were red, rimmed with exhaustion and shock. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't know they were that bad. I just wanted to be somebody. You were somebody, I said softly. You were my son. But that wasn't enough for you, was it? Can I stay? He asked, his voice breaking. Just for tonight? I have nowhere to go. They locked me out of the penthouse weeks ago. I've been sleeping on their couch. And now, he looked around the warm room, the fire crackling in the hearth. I can help you with the vineyard. I can fix the barn. I'll do anything. This was the moment. The moment every mother waits for the return of the prodigal son. My heart wanted to say yes. It wanted to make him soup, tuck him in, and pay off his debts like I always did. But then I looked at the turkey he hadn't touched. I remembered the text message. Don't ask us again. I looked at the man-child who had let his wife call me senile. If I let him stay now, he wouldn't learn. He would just find a new host. Me. No, Ethan, I said. The silence in the room was absolute. Atticus stopped polishing his glasses. Leo looked down at his laptop. What? Ethan gasped. You cannot stay here. But you're my mother. Yes, I said, standing up and walking over to him. I placed my hands on his shoulders. He was trembling. I am your mother, and because I love you, I will not let you hide here. You chose a life of pretension. You incurred those debts. Now, you must go out and pay them. I have no money, he panicked. You have a degree, I reminded him. You have 2 hands, and you have a very expensive lesson to learn. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a set of keys. Not the keys to a Porsche, but the keys to my old 1,990 pickup truck that we used for hauling crates. You can take the truck, I said. And here is $200 for a motel and some food. That is all. Ethan stared at the keys. He looked at me, searching for the pushover Magdalena. She wasn't there. He took the keys. His fingers brushed mine. Will I ever see you again? He asked. When you have paid off your debts, I said. When you have divorced that woman, and when you can come to this house not as a beggar, but as a man, then the door will be open. He nodded. He wiped his face, straightened his spine just a fraction, and turned around. He walked out the door. I heard the old truck engine sputter to life. I watched the headlights disappear down the long driveway. That was brutal, Mags, Leo said quietly, pouring another glass of wine. It was necessary, Atticus corrected him. Restoration requires stripping away the rot. It has been 6 months. The vineyard is blooming. The new buds are green and strong. The Stone family trust is gone, but the land is safe forever in the conservancy. I heard from a friend that Ethan is working as a draftsman for a small construction firm in the next town over. He lives in a studio apartment. He filed for divorce last month. He hasn't called me for money. Not once. Last week, I received a birthday card. No check request, no sob story. Just a card with a picture of a turkey on it. Inside it said, I'm sorry about Thanksgiving. I'm working on myself. Love, Ethan. I put the card on my mantle, right next to the Turner painting. I am alone in this big house, but I am not empty. I realize that emptiness isn't about being alone. Emptiness is being surrounded by people who don't value you. Now, my house is full of peace, full of self-respect, and full of excellent wine. What would you have done? Would you have let him stay, or did I do the right thing by forcing him to face reality? Let me know in the comments, and remember to subscribe for more stories of justice. Cheers.